The first time I failed, it felt like everything inside me collapsed. Not because I had lost something huge, but because I had given it everything I had. Every hour, every late night, every idea I thought was genius, every bit of energy I could find. I poured it all into one project. I remember sitting there after it launched, refreshing over and over, waiting for something magical to happen. I waited for the flood of views. I waited for the comments to pour in, for people to say how awesome it was. But nothing came, a few clicks, some random views, and then silence, like I had shouted into a void that didn't even bother to echo back. At first I felt anger. I blamed the algorithm, the timing, the gear I didn't have, the people who didn't support me. But underneath that frustration, something else started to take hold, doubt, the kind that whispers quietly and lingers even when you try to ignore it. What if I wasn't good enough? What if I was wasting my time? What if this whole thing, this dream, this obsession, was just a fantasy I didn't have the tools to chase? I didn't have the answers. All I had was the silence, and it was loud. But somewhere in the middle of all that noise inside my head, I made a decision. I wasn't going to quit. Not because I was feeling strong or confident or motivated, but because something inside me couldn't let it go. Even though everything pointed to walking away, something told me that this failure had more to teach me than I realized. I didn't want to hear it at the time, but deep down I knew, you don't grow when you're winning. You grow when you're losing, when everything's broken, and you have to rebuild it from the ground up. So I did what most people don't do after failing. I watched the project again. I studied it. I took notes. I asked myself questions I didn't want to ask. Why didn't this connect? What felt off? What parts dragged? I didn't just look at the analytics. I looked in the mirror. And that's not easy. It's hard to be honest with yourself, especially when you've been romanticizing your work. But that's where the growth begins. I started seeing what I hadn't seen before. There were gaps, flaws, lazy choices, missed opportunities, and the truth. I had cut corners in places where I thought no one would notice, but they did, or worse. They just didn't care. Losing exposed all of that. It was brutal. But it was also clarifying. It cut through the noise and showed me exactly where I needed to improve. And as painful as it was, it forced me to evolve. It made me take responsibility. I couldn't blame anyone else. Not the algorithm, not the tools, not the lack of support. Just me. That kind of ownership hurts. But it also unlocks power. Because once you take full responsibility, you realize you also hold the power to change it. I started seeing failure differently. Instead of seeing it as a wall, I saw it as a window, one that looked directly into the soul of my craft. Every failed project became a lesson, a data point, a direction. I started asking better questions, and the answers shaped the next attempt. I stopped obsessing over going viral and started obsessing over getting better. I studied others not to copy, but to understand. What made their work magnetic? How did they hold attention? What emotional threads did they pull on? I began breaking things down frame by frame, second by second, not for inspiration, just for insight. That mindset shift was everything, because now failure wasn't the enemy. It was the blueprint, and I didn't just fail once. I failed again and again and again. I kept pushing. I kept experimenting. I tried ideas that scared me. I spent entire nights building things that never saw the light of day, but something wild started to happen. With each loss, I got better. I got sharper. I learned to tell the difference between effort and excellence. Between noise and message, between content and impact. It wasn't about throwing more hours at it. It was about learning how to make each hour count more than the last. There's something raw and real about failing in public. About putting something out there and hearing nothing back. It breaks a part of you, but it also builds one. You learn to separate your identity from your output. You stop measuring your worth by likes or views. You start focusing on what matters. Did you give it your all? Did you grow from the process? Did you leave it better than you found it? If you can say yes to those questions, then losing isn't a loss, it's the foundation for what comes next. I remember one night, after another disappointing launch, just staring at my screen. I had a choice: go to bed frustrated or get to work. I chose the second. I stayed up all night reworking the idea, writing new scripts, editing until the sun came up. No guarantee of success, just the need to try again. That was the moment it clicked for me. This wasn't about being famous or being popular or even being successful in the traditional sense. It was about chasing a vision. A mission, something that lit me up, whether the world cared or not. And that's when the game changes. Because when you stop chasing applause and start chasing excellence, you become dangerous. You stop fearing judgment. You stop needing approval. You start building something real, something honest, something that might take longer, but will last longer too. I learned to love the process, not just the result. I learned to be patient. To trust the work, to play the long game. That's not something winning teaches you right away. Winning can make you complacent, but losing keeps you sharp. It's easy to assume that success comes from some big break, some magical moment where everything aligns. But that's not how it works. It comes from stacking failure after failure until you've built something unshakable. It comes from the quiet nights, the ideas that bombed, the launches that flopped, the jokes that didn't land. The edits that crashed, the versions that were never uploaded, all of that matters, all of that adds up. If you're willing to keep going, to keep improving, to keep showing up, those losses become bricks. And brick by brick, you build the foundation for something incredible. The truth is, I wouldn't trade those early failures for anything. They humbled me, they shaped me, they made me work harder than I ever thought I could. They taught me discipline, focus, and resilience. They taught me how to adapt, how to listen, how to improve, and most of all, they taught me that no one's going to care as much as you do. You have to be the one who shows up. Who grinds, who learns, who adjusts, who stays when it's easier to leave. That's what losing does. It shows you the truth. And if you're brave enough to face it, it gives you everything you need to win. Not once, but again and again. Even now, I still fail. I still make stuff that doesn't land. I still release things that don't do what I hoped. But I don't see those moments as setbacks. I see them as necessary because they remind me I'm still growing. Still pushing, still evolving, and that's the point. You're never done. You're never finished learning. The day you stop failing is the day you stop improving, and I never want to reach that day. So if you're in the middle of a loss right now, if something you cared about just flopped, if no one's watching, if you feel like quitting, don't. Sit with it, study it, learn from it, let it shape you. Because one day, you're going to look back on this exact moment and realize it was the turning point. The moment you stopped chasing easy wins and started chasing something bigger, something deeper, something that actually matters. And when that day comes, you'll be glad you lost, because what it gave you can't be bought, faked, or borrowed. It can only be earned. After losing enough times, you start to notice something strange. People around you begin to disappear, not all at once, slowly, quietly. The excitement that used to surround you when you first said, "I'm going for this," fades away. The people who were cheering you on start texting less. They stop checking in, they stop asking how it's going. The silence isn't just in your analytics, it's in your life. That's when it gets lonely, and that's when most people quit. But here's what they don't understand. The journey from losing to winning isn't crowded. It's not supposed to be. That space, that silence, is where your mindset gets tested and your purpose gets revealed. See, winning is loud. It attracts attention. Everyone wants to be around a winner. They want to celebrate your success, share your spotlight, be part of the moment. But losing is quiet. Nobody throws you a party for trying and failing. Nobody posts motivational quotes for the person who came in second. And that's what makes it powerful, because in that space, when it's just you and your losses, you find out what you're really made of. I remember sitting in front of a screen again and again, uploading projects that barely moved the needle. I remember the temptation to pivot to something easier, something safer, something that would guarantee more attention. I could have started making clickbait. I could have jumped on trends just to get numbers. I could have catered to the algorithm instead of focusing on improving my craft, but I didn't because every loss reminded me what I was doing this for. I wasn't chasing cheap wins, I was chasing mastery. Legacy, and you don't build that by cutting corners. In those moments when nothing's working and no one's watching, you start making different choices. You start studying harder, you go deeper. You find new ways to improve, not because anyone's asking you to, but because you demand it of yourself. That kind of drive doesn't come from winning. It comes from failing so many times that you realize short. Cuts won't save you. The only way out is through, and through means pain. Through means discipline. Through means learning to show up without applause, without praise, without validation. It means becoming your own motivation. There's something liberating about that. Once you've faced failure enough times and chosen to continue, you realize you're no longer doing it for attention. You're doing it for something internal, something bigger, and that shift, that internal realignment, is where the real growth begins. You stop seeking permission, you stop needing approval, you stop waiting for someone to say you're good enough, because you already know you're getting better. And that's enough. Every time I failed, I built a new version of myself, one that was more resilient, more focused, more honest. I learned to listen to criticism without taking it personally. I learned to separate the noise from the truth. I stopped measuring success by numbers and started measuring it by effort, by improvement, by depth. I asked harder questions. I studied the people I admired, but not just what they posted. I studied how they thought, how they evolved, how they adapted after failure. I reverse-engineered greatness, not to copy it, but to understand its anatomy. Because I wanted to build something of my own, I started experimenting more. Taking creative risks I never would have tried if I had been winning early on. When you're failing already, there's less to lose. So you might as well go bold. And that's where I started discovering what I was really capable of. I learned to trust my instincts, I found my voice, I developed my style, not because I won the lottery of talent, but because I stayed in the game long enough to grow into it. That's the secret most people miss. Success isn't a spotlight, it's a mirror. It reflects what you've built through the hard times, and if you haven't done the inner work, the spotlight won't make you stronger, it'll just expose the cracks. But if you've spent your time in the dark improving, refining, learning, then when the light finally hits you, you'll be ready, not surprised, not overwhelmed, ready. I think back to one particular project that flopped harder than anything I'd ever done. It was personal, raw. I thought it would connect. I thought it would make waves. It barely made ripples. That one stung. For a few days, I didn't even want to touch my gear. I questioned everything, but I forced myself to go back. I rewatched it, took notes, and asked brutally honest questions. That process hurt more than the failure, but what I uncovered changed everything. I realized I had been playing it safe emotionally. I was holding back. Afraid to look foolish, afraid to expose the parts of myself that felt vulnerable, and that fear was dulling my work. So I made a promise, next time, no fear, no filters. I was going to go all in, even if it meant looking ridiculous, even if no one cared. And that next project, it didn't blow up either, but it felt right. It felt true, and the feedback I did get, it was real. It connected with people on a level I hadn't reached before, and that meant more than any number, because it showed me I was moving in the right direction. When you start stacking moments like that, when each failure makes you braver, more skilled, more dialed, and that's when the magic starts to happen. Not overnight, not suddenly, but gradually, your losses start turning into lessons, your lessons start turning into patterns, your patterns become habits, and your habits become the engine behind your success. Not luck, not hype, just consistent, focused improvement. That's what losing teaches you, if you're willing to learn. The most important thing I gained through failure wasn't a technique or a trick, it was mental toughness. The ability to keep going when everything tells you to stop. That's not something you read in a book. That's something you earn through experience, by waking up after a loss and choosing to try again. By facing another project with zero guarantees, by working when no one's watching. That grit, that stubborn refusal to quit is the trait that separates those who make it from those who don't. Most people don't lose once. They lose a few times and decide it's not for them. They tell themselves it's bad timing, or they're not lucky, or they weren't born with it. But the truth is, losing is part of the process, not a detour. Not a mistake. It's the training ground, the fire that refines, and those who can walk through it without turning back. They come out the other side with a strength that can't be faked. You learn how to detach your identity from your performance. That's key, because if you think failure means you're a failure, you'll crumble. But if you realize failure is just data, just feedback, just another step, you'll keep moving, and momentum matters, even slow momentum. Even microscopic gains, every bit adds up. Every failure, every retry, every lesson, stacked on top of each other. That's how you build something unstoppable. I didn't always have support. There were people who laughed, people who didn't get it, people who thought I was wasting time. I couldn't prove them wrong immediately. I didn't have instant results. All I had was my conviction, my belief that this mattered, that this could be something if I didn't quit. And that's what kept me going, not because it was easy, but because it was necessary, because I'd rather fail chasing something I believed in than succeed doing something that meant nothing. That mindset isn't popular. It doesn't go viral, it doesn't get celebrated, but it's real. It's what keeps you grounded when nothing is going your way. And eventually, if you stick with it, people start to notice, not all at once. Not dramatically, but gradually, they start to see the difference in your work, in your tone, in your message, in your results. They start to respect not just what you made, but what you became in the process. And what you become through loss, that's the real reward, the resilience, the clarity, the discipline, the humility, the hunger that stays with you forever. Long after the numbers fade, long after the applause dies down. That's what lasts, and that's why I'll always be grateful for what losing taught me. Because without those moments, without that struggle, I never would have built the foundation I stand on today. The truth is, anybody can celebrate when they're winning. Anybody can smile when the numbers are climbing, when the likes are rolling in, when everyone's saying, "You made it." But success that's only built on applause is fragile. It crumbles the second the crowd goes quiet. What lasts, what really matters, is who you become when nobody's clapping. When you lose, when you fail, when you're down to nothing but your will to keep going, that's when the real you shows up. I didn't get stronger because I won. I got stronger because I lost, and I refused to stay there. Every mistake shaped me. Every failed attempt taught me something no textbook ever could. Losing humbled me, sharpened me, focused me. It forced me to learn, to adapt, to go beyond talent or luck. It made me dangerous, not because I was the best, but because I never stopped showing up. So if you're losing right now, good, that's your shot, that's your moment, not to feel sorry for yourself, but to build something deeper than hype. This is where champions are made, in silence, in struggle, in the shadows where most people quit. If you can keep going when no one sees you, you'll become someone unstoppable when they finally do. You don't need a perfect track record. You don't need overnight validation. You need grit. You need clarity. You need the guts to lose, learn, and level up. Because what losing teaches you, if you're paying attention, will take you further than any win ever could. And when that moment finally comes, when the wins do start to show up, you'll be ready. Not just to handle the spotlight, but to own it, because you didn't stumble into success. You built it, one loss at a time.